Well, joining us for a preview of the summit is Dr. Lynn Kuok in Washington, D.C. She's Lee Kuan Yew Chair at the Brookings Institution. Lynn, hello and good to see you this morning. Thanks for talking to us. I want to start with that to-do list for ASEAN leaders. It's fairly extensive. There's Myanmar, there's the Code of Conduct, there's Thailand, Cambodia, and there is, of course, trade and tariffs. Can I ask you, which are you optimistic about? And which do you think will have to be left to a future summit and perhaps for the Philippines to deal with?
Thank you so much for having me. I think in terms of this ASEAN summit, it's going to be the economy, the economy, the economy. I think given the recent headwinds, ASEAN is going to be very focused on stabilizing the economic landscape. It will be, in order to do this, I think it will be looking to do one of three things. The first, it's going to be seeking to make use of President Trump's presence at the summit to stabilize economic relations with the United States. I don't think it's going to see significant reductions of tariffs, and I don't think that's going to be what it's seeking to do. What it will seek to do, however, is to put relations on a more stable course and perhaps open up the momentum for future specific projects which could be mutually beneficial, for example, digital trade as well as critical minerals. Second, I think ASEAN will also be seeking to enhance economic ties with partner economies, with other major economies that are attending the summit. Given the recent headwinds, it's important for ASEAN to be diversifying its trade and economic partners. And in this respect, I think it's quite notable that an upgraded China-ASEAN FTA is going to be signed. And finally, I think that ASEAN is going to be seeking to promote intra-ASEAN economic ties so as to bolster its resilience in an increasingly uncertain geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape. And I think I heard one of your analysts talk about the digital framework agreement. I think that is going to continue. ASEAN is going to continue with negotiations on that, but also possibly signing an upgraded ASEAN trade in goods agreement. So lots on ASEAN's plate in the economic front. And of course, it's also going to be seeking to discuss various security issues. You mentioned the South China Sea, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia is going to be a big issue, given that President Trump is in the region to attend that summit, that peace agreement. So I think all those issues are also going to be on the table as well. But I think the focus is certainly going to be on the economic front.
Okay. I mean, you don't sound very hopeful, about resolving conflicts at the summit. Myanmar is a huge talking point. 5-point peace plan not implemented. Anwar Ibrahim has been very involved. He sent his foreign minister twice this year, to try and work out something. I mean, is there anything that you think will happen? Does the bloc have anything else you think it can do?
I think when you say I'm not optimistic about resolving conflict, I think there is one shining light, and that is the fact that Thailand and Cambodia was a few months ago able to reach a ceasefire agreement and agree on terms of reference of that ceasefire agreement. I think that shouldn't be overlooked. In terms of the Myanmar conflict, I think that has been going on for several years now, and the 5-point peace plan has not actually achieved very much. The Myanmar junta has basically thumbed its nose at the 5-point peace plan, which sought a cessation of hostilities, of all parties speaking, and even those sort of basic things have not been achieved. So I doubt that we're going to see any cessation of the immediate hostilities or a more long-lasting political agreement. And added to that, of course, is the additional complication that Myanmar is slated to hold elections at the and ASEAN will come into some pressure not to recognize what the international community sees as, or many parts of the international community see as an illegitimate election. So optimism in terms of the Cambodia-Thailand deal, less optimism in terms of the Myanmar situation.
And on Thailand and Cambodia, with the peace deal set to be signed at the summit, possibly witnessed by President Trump. Lynn, tell us how much of this moment is going to be a genuine conflict resolution? How much of it, though, could be a high-stakes performance for U.S. influence in Southeast Asia?
Thanks for that question. I think we shouldn't belittle the fact that that a ceasefire was reached. I don't think that we're going to have a longer term political resolution. There hasn't been agreement in terms of demarcation of the border. Nonetheless, I think we've seen important terms reached to remove weapons from the border, to clear landmines that were laid in the midst of this conflict, for the return of Cambodian soldiers by Thailand. So there has been progress made, and I think that's important. Whether it's political theater, yes, to a certain extent. President Trump is very interested in presiding over the ceremony. There was talk about them not wanting, the United States not wanting Chinese presence there. But although President Trump has been criticized for this political theater, nonetheless, I think he should be credited for coming down quite hard on both parties to reach a ceasefire agreement, and therefore then paving the way for ASEAN to step in to negotiate, to work with both parties to negotiate a ceasefire deal. So I think, all of that's really important. And the test now will be whether or not ASEAN will be able to step even more into that political opening to help both parties reach a longer term solution for their border crisis.
Okay. I want to go back conflict. Understood. I want to go back to what you were saying a bit earlier about, tariffs and trade rather, and the opportunity, if you like, for ASEAN to perhaps work out, fairly detailed trade deals with the United States. So with Trump, going to meet Xi Jinping at the APEC summit on Thursday, I'm wondering how that plays into the negotiations which are going to take place. We know that, Anwar and Trump are going to meet. ASEAN as a bloc is going to meet with Donald Trump as well. I mean, how do you see this playing out? Is this an opportunity, for them to, I guess, actually get a deal?
For ASEAN to get a deal with the United States, or?
Either as a bloc or individually.
I think the groundwork for an overarching deal with a trade deal with the United States has not been laid. I don't think we're going to be seeing that. Nonetheless, I think we can hope that this meeting is a pathfinder, in a sense, to future ASEAN-US cooperation. I think ASEAN is going to be watching very closely what happens between the United States and China at the APEC meeting, not least because trade reverberations from that particular trade relationship is going to have implications for ASEAN.
Also, Lynn, final question for you. On the host, Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, he's hosting the summit. He's inviting Donald Trump. He's also facing planned pro-Palestine protests in Kuala Lumpur. So how do you see him balancing regional leadership ambitions with these domestic pressures?
Well, I think how he sought to balance that is to say that the invitation to the United States president was not extended as a bilateral invitation between Malaysia and the United States, but was extended by Malaysia as ASEAN chair to the United States for the ASEAN meeting. So I think that was a savvy diplomatic move that might not satisfy those in Malaysia that are protesting President Trump's attendance at or presence in Malaysia. But I think it's important for Malaysia to look at the bigger picture. Yes, what is happening in Gaza, what has happened in Gaza is horrific. And certainly I understand the sentiment of those protesting. Nonetheless, I think it's really important, given what's at stake, the economic and strategic stakes for Malaysia, not just as Malaysia, but as ASEAN chair as well, to seek to steer the country, the region, towards a more stable footing with the United States.
Lynn, I'm trying to get a read on Trump's overall commitment to the region and in particular Southeast Asia. He's only been to an ASEAN summit once back in 2017. So is this something driven solely by, strategic interests and vis-a-vis that would be China? Or is there, now a more holistic approach that's driven by mutual benefit?
I think that President Trump's attendance at this ASEAN summit is driven first and foremost by the opportunity for the president to attend the Thailand-Cambodia ceasefire ceremony. I think that is his overriding concern. I think it's despite what it says about, the sort of narrow focus of the United States intervention and what it says about ASEAN's former inability to open the doors to both parties to come to the negotiating table, I think it's nonetheless an important opportunity for ASEAN to then pave the way towards more constructive relations with the United States and to open the door towards greater understanding by the president of why ASEAN and Southeast Asia more generally matters to U.S. interests. And so I think, having it understand the strategic importance of the region and the economic importance of the region will be something that ASEAN is or should be seeking to do.
And Lynn, another very, very big event that will be happening at the ASEAN summit is the formal admission of Timor-Leste as the 11th member of the bloc. Is this a milestone or a headache for the bloc's ability to act? Because as we know, consensus is already so hard to achieve.
I think it's both. It's certainly a milestone. Timor-Leste has been waiting in the wings for some time. And I think its former leader actually talked about, or its leader has talked about how difficult it is to enter ASEAN, more difficult than entering heaven. So a milestone for Timor-Leste and for, the sort of aspirations that ASEAN holds out. It's also a headache because, there are various challenges that will that Timor-Leste's entry into ASEAN will pose. First, Timor-Leste is a very poor country. It's still developing and it constitutes only 0.1% of ASEAN's GDP. So whether or not it will be able to lift itself up through its own capacity, but also through help from ASEAN member states and other countries, that will be an important question to how much of a headache it is. Second, one should also be looking at the ability of Timor-Leste to balance great powers in the region or in its country. It's ideologically closer to the West, given its democratic credentials, but it also welcomes and it's open to and needs Chinese investment. So the ability to balance between China and the United States will be important. And related to this, what it means, as you pointed out, for ASEAN unity will also be very important. And, ASEAN has not always been the most unified grouping. In the past, that hurt its position. But now with the geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape being what it is, it's all the more important that ASEAN needs to remain unified so that it can be shaping its own future as it moves forward.
Appreciate your insight so very much this Friday. Thank you, Dr. Lynn Kuok, Lee Kuan Yew Chair at the Brookings Institution.